Hi, today I'm going to review the new La Dispute album, and if you're unfamiliar with this group, they're a post-hardcore emo group, and I've got some feelings on their output thus far. In a sense, they're a bit frustrating for me, just because I feel like this group honestly has like a 10 out of 10 record in them. If they were to just make that project a little bit more instrumentally engaging, or maybe incorporate a more unique guitar tone, it's just that despite them being technically skilled, the way they handle their production just feels a bit standard to me. With all that being said, there are a few songwriters I enjoy hearing speak more than Jordan Dreyer. Like, I wish more artists prioritized incorporating a genuine human honesty into their work the way that these guys do. This type of shit just makes me feel more okay with living. Honestly, that factor alone is enough to save everything for me. Like, although I can point out things that I personally wish were different about La Dispute's records, it's hard for me to walk away from them without feeling fulfilled. Compared with the other albums in their discography, Panorama feels dimmer and more dejected. The guitars kind of slither through this album in more of an ominous and despondent way, and the bass is gritty and sinister as fuck and might put a sinking feeling into your stomach. And vocally, there is a lot more spoken word, but Jordan comes through with a punch when the moment is right, at the point which it would be backed by a more forceful instrumental too. And lyrically, Dreyer talks a lot about witnessing someone else, who I think is his wife, dealing with the death of someone that she was close to, and not feeling like he is the person he should be morally for her and everyone else he loves. And there's a lot of imagery as well of like fire and parking lots and highways and ambulances, which makes me think that it was some sort of car-related incident. Fulton Street 1 does a really good job at demonstrating how all of these things work together. It uses these desolate chords that build to the chorus over this thin layer of ambiance, and then the drums just hammer down and the guitars evolve into a stirring flare, and the hook is probably the most emotionally resonant part of this whole album for me, where he talks about how he never showed his respect to the person who died, and later reflecting on it and why he couldn't just do that simple thing that would have shown the kindness and compassion that he wanted to. Maybe it was for mental reasons, or because he didn't prioritize it in his life, but either way, his feelings of remorse are so potent. And Fulton Street 2 keeps the momentum going really nicely. The guitars are more menacing and bulky on this track, and the dynamic riffs and drum performances towards the end are so gratifying. I just love this two-track run. And another theme that comes up a lot on this record is just being plagued by thoughts that you are mortal and will one day die no matter how happy you are. Which is what makes a track like You Ascended so captivating. The reverb, silky guitar chords here sound so mesmeric over the pulsating kick drum, and I think this track either metaphorically imagines his wife dying or revisits the moment that her loved one dies, because either way, whoever it is wanders off into the highway blank-faced and completely numb to what's going on, wondering when the rest of the world is going to catch on to their pain. And he later hopes that when something like this does happen, he won't be torn away from her. And this verse, which suggests that maybe you could escape the anguish at the end of your life and die while enjoying your morning cup of coffee, or dozing off to sleep, watching TV in the evening with the person you adore, not even seeing it coming, just really touched me. And just knowing from this not to waste your time alive, because the truth is that we're so lucky to even be conscious or experiencing the world at all. And then there's this other part on In Northern Michigan, which also talks about the sheer beauty of just being alive with someone you love. And just the setting that this track paints is like intensely vivid and gratifying, and he also brings up the memories that he feels lucky to have with her on here too. But this track also starts by acknowledging the fact that she's in front of water, and then by the end harshly transitions into this hallucination he has where she's drowning. And it feels like his brain is just forcing him into this misery, and I feel like this contrast really shows how his brain is so restless and just can't stay on one idea. But I do think that this song shouldn't have had the somewhat awkward vocal inflection in the middle, where Jordan kind of speaks like he's in a hurry and it doesn't really sync up with the instrumental on purpose. To me, it just comes across as a bit forced and distracting, although I feel like I know what he was trying to do here. But still though, the bass here is just so haunting. It kind of pulverizes the track along with this flood of chords and drums with a steady rhythm that kind of remind me of a heartbeat. And also, despite this intense desperation to stay with her, he sometimes struggles to keep the relationship alive in the first place, and therefore kind of finds sick comfort in being alone and far from the people that he should be comforting. And I think There You Are illustrates this idea of how aloneness and even loneliness can be easier for his brain to process than lending himself so generously to another person and adapting to her expectations, because we're all just so individual that the reality is that relationships are really hard. But as a counter-argument to that idea, View from Our Bedroom Window shows how confiding in a person and fighting through pain together is possible. Like this in particular, I'm interpreting as how you can be through hell with this person, but even at the peak of your suffering, you may be able to find some glimmer of hope in acceptance and knowing that you have nothing to lose and continuing through life. I can still see the argument that Panorama is lyrically a step down from their other records because what's said does feel more vague, but to me it just feels so instinctual and stream of consciousness that I'm not entirely sure I want it to be any different. Like, you can tell that this is what feels natural for them, so I don't necessarily want to advise them to try to polish it because it could make it sound too forced or stiff. I could also see how you could be put off by the fact that the songwriting is constantly so emotional, but honestly, when you're dealing with this extent of trauma, your thoughts kind of are constantly overdramatic, which is why a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about it, and another reason why I love the fact that they do. However, the biggest issue that I have with this album is the fact that it is repetitive, like lyrically, vocally, and instrumentally. Like by the end, the spoken word parts and the atmospheric slow burners and the explosive choruses and the references to his wife struggling to sleep and anxiousness just kind of feel like a given. Like, it's not that the ideas aren't good, it's just that they're not rearranged in a way that makes it consistently exciting in one sitting. And again, this is a huge shame, but for a 7, I'm still really glad that I heard it because I was able to pull out a decent handful of things that made me think, and I appreciate it for what it is, so I recommend that you hear it too.